The storm clouds gathered low over the quiet suburban street, heavy and gray, as if the sky itself shared in the sorrow of one woman's heart. In a neighborhood of perfect hedges and gleaming driveways, a figure stood outside the wrought iron gates of a sprawling mansion. Her hands clutched a faded handbag, and beside her were two small children, twins with wide brown eyes and innocent faces who held tightly onto her skirt. Her name was Sharon. For years, she had worked as a maid, cleaning houses she could never dream of owning, polishing silverware she'd never use, and scrubbing floors that would never carry her children's laughter. Today, though, she wasn't just any maid. She was a mother desperate for a chance, standing before the gates of a mansion that could change her life. From inside the mansion, the sounds of wealth echoed, clinking glasses, laughter, the hush of carpets so thick they swallowed footsteps. The owner was a well-known millionaire named Richard Collins, a man whose success story was whispered like a legend in business circles. But Sharon wasn't here to see him. She was here for a job. A maid position had opened at the Collins estate, and she had been promised an interview. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. Her twins, Alana and Aiden, clung to her sides. She had tried to find someone to watch them, but her neighbor's son had fallen sick, and no one else was willing to babysit at such short notice. She had no choice but to bring them with her, praying that honesty and humility would outweigh whatever judgments awaited her inside. When the gates opened, Sharon walked up the long driveway, her children's small feet padding against the concrete. The house towered above them, its windows glowing like the eyes of some grand, unapproachable creature. A housekeeper opened the door and led them in, her eyes widening at the sight of the children but saying nothing. They were shown into the grand living room, where tall ceilings and marble floors announced wealth in every corner. Sharon instructed her twins to sit quietly on the edge of the sofa, folding their little hands in their laps. She smoothed her simple cotton dress nervously, her eyes scanning the golden-framed portraits that adorned the walls. Then the voice cut through the air like a whip. "Who are these children?" Sharon turned to see a tall woman sweeping into the room, dressed in an expensive silk gown that shimmered with every step. Her name was Veronica, Richard Collins' wife. Her face was beautiful but hardened, her sharp eyes narrowing at the sight of the twins. Sharon stood quickly, bowing her head slightly. "Ma'am, these are my children. I didn't have anyone to leave them with today. I apologize, but I couldn't miss this opportunity." Veronica's lips twisted into a sneer. "An opportunity? You think you can just drag your brats into this house as if we're running a daycare? This is a mansion, not some shelter for the poor." The twins shrank under her glare. Aiden leaned against his mother's leg, while Alana's eyes filled with tears she fought to keep from spilling. Sharon's heart ached, but she stayed calm. "Ma'am, they will be no trouble. They'll sit quietly. Please, I just need a chance to prove myself." But Veronica's voice grew sharper, rising with each word. "No chance. I will not have some maid bringing her children into my home. It's unprofessional, it's irresponsible, and it's disgraceful. If you cannot separate your personal mess from your work, then you do not belong here." The words struck Sharon like blows. She clenched her hands together tightly to keep from trembling. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I only ask for a chance to work, to provide for them. I would give everything I have to do this job well." But Veronica had already turned away, waving her hand as if dismissing a servant. "Get out. Take your children and leave before you embarrass yourself further." The room felt colder with each syllable. Sharon swallowed hard, looking at her children's frightened faces. She knew she couldn't argue further, wealthy people like Veronica never listened to the poor. She reached for their hands, preparing to leave, her heart heavy with disappointment. And that's when the sound of footsteps echoed through the marble hall. Firm, steady, commanding. Richard Collins walked into the room. His tall frame and sharp suit commanded attention, but his eyes, piercing blue and full of quiet strength, saw everything that others overlooked. He stopped when he noticed the scene, his wife standing rigid with irritation, the young maid clutching two frightened children, and the air heavy with tension. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice calm but carrying weight. Veronica straightened, quickly composing herself. "Richard, this woman showed up for an interview with her children. Can you believe it? She thought it was acceptable to drag them into our home, as if she belongs here with her baggage. I was just sending her away." Richard's gaze lingered on Sharon. He didn't miss the way she held her children close, as if shielding them from cruelty. He noticed the children's quiet, well-mannered posture, their wide eyes searching the room for kindness that seemed out of reach. He turned back to his wife. "You were sending her away?" "Yes," Veronica snapped. "She's completely unfit. We can hire a real professional, someone who knows their place." For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then Richard's voice dropped lower, steadier. "Veronica, do you know what it means to struggle? To have nothing, yet still show up with dignity and courage? Because that's what I see in this woman." Sharon blinked, caught off guard. She hadn't expected anyone, least of all the millionaire himself, to defend her. Richard stepped closer, addressing Sharon now. "What's your name?" "Sharon, sir," she answered softly. He nodded. "And these are your children?" "Yes, sir. I had no choice but to bring them with me today. I didn't want to lose this chance." Richard studied her for a moment longer, then glanced back at his wife. "Veronica, if you judge a woman for loving her children and doing everything in her power to provide for them, then maybe you're the one unfit to decide who belongs here." The room fell silent. Veronica's face flushed with anger, but she had no words. She was unused to being challenged. Sharon's heart pounded. She had walked into this mansion expecting rejection, humiliation, maybe even despair. But in Richard's steady gaze, she saw something different, something that felt like hope. And she would need that hope, because her story was only just beginning. Sharon's breath caught in her throat as Richard's words echoed through the lavish room. She couldn't remember the last time anyone of status had spoken up for her. Usually, people like her were invisible, only seen when there was dirt to clean or food to serve. Yet here was a man whose wealth could buy almost anything, looking at her as if she mattered. Veronica's sharp heels clicked angrily against the marble as she crossed her arms. "Richard, you're being ridiculous. You cannot honestly expect me to let some maid with 2 children underfoot work in this house. It's chaos waiting to happen." Richard's eyes didn't waver. "No, what's ridiculous is judging someone by their struggles instead of their character. You know my story. You know where I came from. Do you think I would ever turn away a mother who's just trying to give her kids a better life?" The room went still. Sharon's hands tightened around her children's. Alana whispered softly, "Mama, are we in trouble?" Her daughter's trembling voice nearly broke her. Sharon crouched to hug both twins close, whispering, "No, baby. You're not in trouble. Mama's here." Richard stepped forward, crouching down so he could see the twins at eye level. His stern expression softened as he smiled gently. "And what are your names?" "Aiden," the little boy said shyly, clutching his sister's hand. "Alana," she whispered. Richard nodded, his smile widening. "Those are strong names. And you both did very well sitting quietly. That shows respect. You should be proud of yourselves." The children's eyes lit up a little, and Sharon's heart swelled with both relief and gratitude. "Richard," Veronica snapped, her patience thinning, "you are wasting your time. We don't need pity projects in this household. We need professionals. If you insist on hiring her, don't expect me to tolerate her children constantly around." Richard stood tall again, his commanding presence filling the space. "Veronica, I built this home, but I haven't forgotten the people who helped me get here. I know what it's like to have doors slammed in your face. And I won't allow it to happen under my roof." His words stung Veronica, but Sharon could see he wasn't saying them just to argue, he meant them. Turning back to Sharon, Richard asked, "Do you have experience in housekeeping?" "Yes, sir," she answered quickly, her voice trembling with nervous hope. "I've cleaned homes for years. I can cook, clean, do laundry, whatever is needed. I'll work hard. I promise." Richard nodded. "That's all I need to hear." Then, in a tone that brooked no argument, he said, "You're hired." Sharon's knees nearly gave out. The children's faces lit up, though they stayed quiet out of respect. She opened her mouth, trying to find the right words, but all that came was a breathless, "Thank you, sir. Thank you so much." Richard offered a small smile. "Thank me by doing your best. That's all I ask." But behind them, Veronica's voice cut like ice. "This is absurd. You're going to regret this, Richard. I won't have those children running around ruining everything. And if she fails even once, don't expect me to stay silent." Richard's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue further. Instead, he looked back at Sharon. "Start tomorrow morning. Be here by 8. You'll meet the head housekeeper, and she'll show you your duties." He paused, then added, "And as for your children, we'll figure something out. For now, let them come with you until we do." Sharon's eyes stung with tears. No one had ever said words so kind to her before, not in a place like this, not when she expected rejection. "I won't let you down, sir. I swear it." Richard gave a small nod and left the room, his footsteps fading down the hall. The moment he was gone, Veronica's face twisted with fury. She stepped closer, lowering her voice to a venomous whisper so the children wouldn't hear. "Don't think for a second you belong here. He may have hired you, but I'll be watching. And when you slip up, and you will, I'll make sure you and your little brats are thrown out for good." Sharon's throat tightened, but she said nothing. She gathered her children, thanked the housekeeper, and walked back down the driveway, the heavy gates closing behind them. Outside, the storm clouds had begun to part, a single ray of sunlight piercing through. Sharon clung to that light like a promise. That night, in their small rented apartment, Sharon tucked Alana and Aiden into bed. Their mattresses were old, the wallpaper peeling, but the twins didn't seem to mind. They looked at her with wide smiles. "Mama," Aiden whispered, "did you hear him? He said our names were strong." Sharon stroked his hair and kissed his forehead. "That's because they are. And so are you." Alana tugged her mother's hand. "Do you think we'll get to stay in that big house?" Sharon's eyes softened. "I don't know yet, baby. But I do know this, we're going to try our very best. And no matter what happens, as long as we're together, we'll be okay." After they drifted off to sleep, Sharon sat by the small kitchen table, her hands folded in prayer. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but this time they weren't only from sorrow. For the first time in a long time, there was a spark of hope in her chest. The next morning, she rose before dawn. She dressed carefully in her neatest uniform, pressed and clean, though faded from years of use. She braided Alana's hair, polished Aiden's shoes, and made them oatmeal with a touch of cinnamon, the last of what she had in the cupboard. By the time they reached the mansion gates again, the sun was rising, painting the sky with shades of gold and pink. Sharon's heart pounded as she walked up the long driveway, her children at her side. Today would be the true beginning. Inside, the head housekeeper, Mrs. Whitaker, greeted them. She was an older woman with sharp features but kind eyes. "So, you're the new maid," she said briskly. "Follow me. I'll show you where to start." Sharon nodded eagerly, and with her twins trailing behind, she stepped inside the mansion once more. But as she began her first day, she didn't realize just how closely someone else was watching. Or how much harder her journey would become. Sharon's first days at the mansion were not easy. She scrubbed floors until her knees ached, polished silver until her fingers went numb, and carried laundry up and down winding staircases that seemed to stretch forever. Yet she never complained. Every time she felt her body falter, she thought of Alana and Aiden, waiting quietly in the corner with their coloring books and small snacks, watching her with admiration. Mrs. Whittaker, the head housekeeper, proved stern but fair. She corrected Sharon often, but there was no cruelty in her tone, only expectation. "If you're going to work in this house," she said one morning, handing Sharon a bundle of linens, "then you'll do it right. This family may have money, but discipline runs this household. Remember that." "Yes, ma'am," Sharon replied, grateful for even the strict guidance. But not everyone shared Mrs. Whittaker's quiet decency. Veronica seemed to lurk everywhere, her sharp eyes waiting for Sharon to falter. One afternoon, when Sharon accidentally left a rag folded on the counter while rushing to tend to the laundry, Veronica pounced. "So this is the maid my husband insisted on hiring?" Veronica said loudly, her voice dripping with contempt. "Sloppy. Unprofessional. Can't even keep track of her own mess. If this is the best you can do, then you'll be gone within a week." Sharon bowed her head, whispering, "I'm sorry, ma'am. It won't happen again." Behind her, Alana and Aiden clutched each other, their eyes filled with worry. Veronica noticed and smirked cruelly. "And of course, the children. Always here, underfoot. I told Richard this would be a disaster." Her words stung, but Sharon swallowed her pride. She couldn't afford to fight back. She would endure it all for the sake of her children. Days turned into weeks. Sharon rose before dawn, prepared meals for her children, and then worked tirelessly until her body cried out for rest. Yet through the exhaustion, she held on to dignity. Richard noticed. Every so often, he would catch glimpses of her, quietly folding linens, guiding her children with a gentle hand, working with precision and care. He admired her resilience, though he kept most of his thoughts to himself. One evening, however, everything changed. Veronica hosted a lavish dinner party, inviting some of the wealthiest families in the city. The mansion glowed with chandeliers, laughter, and the clinking of fine crystal. Sharon was assigned to help serve. Dressed in her plain uniform, she moved quietly between guests, balancing trays and refilling glasses. Alana and Aiden waited in a small side room, coloring quietly, just as Sharon had asked. But when one of the guests accidentally left a door ajar, Aiden wandered into the dining hall, curious about the laughter and bright lights. He carried a crayon in one hand, his small shoes tapping softly against the marble. The room grew silent. "What is this?" one guest whispered, raising a brow. Before Sharon could react, Veronica's voice pierced the silence. This is exactly what I warned you about. The maid's child, running loose in the middle of a formal dinner. Sharon's heart stopped. She rushed forward, scooping Aiden into her arms. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "He didn't mean any harm. Please forgive us." But Veronica wasn't finished. Her face flushed with rage as she turned to the guests. "Can you believe this? We open our home for a dignified evening, and my husband insists on employing a maid who can't even control her own children. It's disgraceful." The guests murmured uncomfortably, their eyes darting between Veronica and Sharon. Aiden buried his face in his mother's neck, trembling with shame. Sharon's eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. And then Richard rose from his seat. His tall figure commanded silence as he looked at his wife, his expression unreadable. "Enough, Veronica." His voice was calm, but it carried such weight that the entire room stilled. "This woman works harder than anyone here will ever know," Richard continued. "And those children? They are not an inconvenience. They are a reminder of why she fights so hard. If you cannot see the dignity in that, then perhaps you are the one who does not belong in this house tonight." Gasps rippled through the guests. Veronica's face twisted, but she could say nothing. Richard turned to Sharon, his gaze softening. You have nothing to apologize for. Take your children and get some rest. Tomorrow is another day. Sharon's chest heaved, emotion threatening to break through. She managed a trembling, "Thank you, sir," and carried Aiden away, Alana hurrying behind her. That night, as Sharon tucked the twins into bed, Aiden whispered, "Mama, are we going to be sent away?" Sharon brushed his hair gently. "No, baby. Not while I'm breathing." But deep inside, she worried. Veronica's hatred was strong, and Sharon feared it was only a matter of time before it consumed her chances. The very next morning, however, everything changed again. Richard called Sharon into his study. The room was lined with bookshelves and filled with the scent of leather and oak. He gestured for her to sit, though she stood nervously instead. "Sharon," he began, his tone gentle, "I know my wife has made things difficult for you. And yet, you've endured it all with patience and grace. I see how hard you work. I see how much you love your children. And I want to offer you something more." Her breath caught. "More, sir." Richard leaned forward. "This house is too large to be filled with anger and cruelty. I want it to be a place where people feel safe. I'd like you not only to stay but to take on a permanent role here, full-time, with better pay, and with a small room in the servants' quarters for you and your children. That way, they'll have a safe place, and you won't have to worry each day about where to leave them." Sharon's knees nearly gave out. Her hands shook as she pressed them together. "Sir, I don't know what to say. You would do that for us?" Richard nodded firmly. "Yes. Because you've earned it." For the first time in years, Sharon allowed the tears to fall. She covered her face with her hands, sobbing softly, while Richard quietly gave her space. When she finally composed herself, she whispered, "Thank you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. I'll never forget this." And she meant it. From that day forward, Sharon and her twins had a home within the mansion walls. Alana and Aiden were given a chance to grow in safety and light, their laughter filling corners of the house that had once felt cold. Sharon continued to work with diligence, her strength and humility admired by those who truly paid attention. As for Veronica, her bitterness only deepened. But Richard's word was final. And over time, even some of the staff who had once doubted Sharon began to respect her resilience. Months later, on a quiet afternoon, Sharon watched her children playing in the garden, their laughter echoing under the warm sun. She thought back to that stormy day when she had first walked through the gates with fear in her heart, rejected and humiliated. She remembered the sting of Veronica's words, the weight of despair pressing down on her shoulders. And then she remembered Richard's voice, steady and unyielding, "If you judge a woman for loving her children and doing everything in her power to provide for them, then maybe you're the one unfit to decide who belongs here." Sharon smiled softly, tears glistening in her eyes. Her life was far from perfect, and challenges still lay ahead. But one thing had become clear: dignity, love, and perseverance could withstand even the harshest rejection. And sometimes, all it took was one open door, one act of kindness, to change everything. And so, Sharon's story became not just her own, but a message to anyone who struggled, who was overlooked, who was told they didn't belong. Never stop fighting for your place. Because one day, the right person will see your worth.